Moving on to number 4 on our list of the top 10 stories of 2017, we learned this year through some incredible reporting by our correspondent Jeff Proctor, who reports for New Mexico in depth, that the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms set up a drug sting in Albuquerque that led to a disproportionate number of arrests of African Americans. And the details of those reports were even more concerning. And Mary, you know, it's hard to get into the weeds of the details in this, but in the broadest strokes in just reporting, some of these guys that they were bringing in from outside the city to act as, you know, couriers and, you know, snitches and all this kind of thing, the whole thing added up to a very sloppy affair when you really looked at it closely. What was your sense of it? And also, what does it say about the relationship between ATF or a federal agency and our local agencies who also participated in this as well?
Yeah, I remember when this big announcement happened back in 2016 of the arrests that were made, and there were loads of law enforcement present at the press conference and at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I think that, so at the heart of this was that the African American community may have been, you know, targeted, and some lower level criminals were caught up in the system as part of these arrests under a program meant to target the worst of the worst.
That's right. And they used that language, didn't they? The worst of the worst.
Yeah, which has been a long time kind of initiative here in the city to get at the crime rate. Now, I think, as you mentioned, outsiders came in from ATF to execute, and that's where I think things get sticky as far as when you start to look at the big picture of the city and you think about police reform as well. And at the heart of police reform, and I think in that DOJ agreement, is a lot of rebuilding trust and rebuilding trust among communities of color in the city. And I don't know really, I couldn't definitely say the full impact of what that sting might have been, but it's hard to say that it could have helped that relationship.
Good point. When you think about those that were brought in, to Mary's point, echoing what these folks are telling us about the worst of the worst, turned out through just reporting, they weren't the worst of the worst at all. And in fact, it was so under that threshold, a lot of folks felt like they wouldn't even bother, you know, to spend their time on this because there were really no big convictions to be had. So I'm curious where this leaves us as citizens supposed to be feeling a little bit safer about things going on here. Do you know what I mean? Did they move the needle in any sort of way for us here?
Right. I mean, I thought one of Jeff's stories that was really powerful, I mean, I thought he did really good reporting on all of it, about, you know, a woman who was involved in a romantic relationship with one of these informants. And,
That's right.
You know, she was trying to be clean by his account, and he kind of pressured her into getting, you know, drugs. And I mean, things like that,
despicable,
and kind of, you know, does this really make our community safer? You know, and in effect, you know, this isn't really taking out these big level, you know, folks who are bringing in large quantities of drugs. I mean, it seemed like it was kind of preying on these folks, and if maybe even entrapping some of them in some cases.
And that was the accusation. We'll see how that plays out as well. Matt, you know, then U.S. Attorney David Martinez came in right at this table, and he couldn't say much about it, but it was clear to me, sort of watching that. I just had the sense he knew something wasn't quite right here. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know what he knew, and I would say, or what he knew. I apparently don't know English either, but you know, I would say that he didn't say much about it. I don't know that he couldn't say much about it. I think Jeff spent a little bit of time probing whether or not he had asked to be able to speak about that. I think it's going to be a problem for him. He's running for Congress. You know, he's a relatively unknown name except for police reform and for big press conferences like the one Mary was talking about where they kicked this off and the worst of the worst. And you end up with an entire community in what is not the worst part crime-wise of the city, statistics show, thinking that the people who came through there, this traveling circus of ATF, agents and their informants who make more than any of us at this table, coming through and basically picking on a part of town that now thinks that those guys are the worst of the worst.
That's right. Exactly right. We had some members of the African American community here at this table as well that same week with Mr. Martinez, and they echoed pretty much what Matt just said. That, you know, there's an idea here that I don't care what community it is, but in the African American community, yes, we do need some help on crime here. We're actually asking for that, but this is not the way. You know what I mean? And so that gets back to Mary's point about trust. How do you feel about that? You know, that idea that, you know, you can still be a Fed, but you're still part of the process here that has to develop trust with people.
It's unfortunate that an outside agency would come in and ruin trust, because if Albuquerque police is ever going to restore its reputation, and if the different communities, whether of color or not, are going to trust their cops, they have to trust law enforcement. And I would say, too, this once again underscores the importance of good reporting, because if you just listen to the press conference, they got the worst of the worst. But no, Jeff took a deeper look and went beyond the headlines and beyond the sound bites.
That's right.
And found out a different story.
Yeah, very
So we
much
need
so.
reporters.
Thank you for saying that. Exactly right. We're still under a consent decree here in Albuquerque. We're getting into a new year now. There's a lot of heartburn about Mr. Ginger in some circles. Some folks do support him. We're having changes about how citizens are able to, report things they want to report. Where do we sit now as far as this is concerned, as you see it? Where's the consent decree fit in now?
Well, I think some of that will remain to be seen with the new mayor. I think it had gotten pretty fractious under the previous administration, even secretly recording conversations.
Yes.
And I think folks had dug in. So maybe this is a chance for, I guess we'll see which direction it goes, but maybe a chance at least to kind of
Right.
not start over, but kind of get a bit of a clean slate. And I do think, Albuquerque certainly does have crime problems and has some issues with police issues, staffing, trust. There's a lot there and a lot of legitimate issues that need to be worked on.
Mary, real quick, just about 30 seconds on this. There is heartburn as well about the cost of all this. And there's starting to be a bit of a drumbeat now saying we need to wrap this up because we're getting towards a couple of mil north. You know what I mean? Suddenly things start to feel a lot different when you're talking that amount of money.
Yeah, there's you've heard it. We heard it in the Albuquerque mayor's race that there's just this big push to let's speed this up, and it's a 5-year agreement.
Right.
It is agreed upon and stuck in the courts. And then I would say though one thing I think we're hearing is a lot of support in police reform for funding law enforcement. So we'll see if that comes this year. The Democrats are for it. Can't imagine there's too much resistance against it.
That's a good point.
Well, and just really quickly, I mean, whatever the city is spending on Jim Ginger is a heck of a lot cheaper than what they've been spending on civil lawsuits.
That's
Yes,
right.
exactly.
North of 30 million over the past few
50
years.
million.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Exactly right. It's a lot. Now, have to end that one right there. We will be back in a few minutes to talk about more top news stories of this past year.